China appears to be expanding its sprawling nuclear weapons testing complex in the nation's western desert. Satellite imagery shared exclusively with NPR shows a possible new tunnel being dug and fresh roads added at the site, known as Lop Nur, where China has tested its nuclear weapons in the past. This is new construction linked to areas that have in the past supported nuclear test activities, says Reni Babiars, Vice President for Analysis and Operations at All Source Analysis, a private geospatial analysis firm that spotted the tunnel using satellite imagery from the commercial company Planet. But Babiars adds that it remains far from clear what the tunnel will be used for. China has not conducted full-scale nuclear testing since the 1990s, when it and the world's other major nuclear powers entered into a voluntary moratorium on testing. The Chinese government, and other nations including the US, have continued to test the non-nuclear components of nuclear weapons, sometimes underground. In an email, Lu Pengyu, a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., declined to comment on the site itself, but he said that China stays committed to the nuclear testing moratorium. He also objected to unacceptable U.S. allegations that the Chinese government was in any way trying to undermine the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, an unratified treaty that remains the basis for the global pause to nuclear testing. The news of the new tunnel comes after two separate groups turned up giant nuclear missile fields under construction in other parts of the country earlier in the month. Over the past year and a half, China has constructed at least two large facilities, each with more than 100 missile silos, says Jeffrey Lewis, a professor at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, who announced the discovery of the first field on July 2. China had 18 silos prior to this. Lewis notes that even with the newly discovered missile silos, China's nuclear force remains far smaller than America's. "We're getting worked up over 200 silos, which is something," he says. But the United States has more than 400. The US also has bombers and submarines capable of delivering a nuclear strike. Still, the growth in China's nuclear arsenal may mark a departure from the nation's traditional attitude toward nuclear weapons. For decades, while the US and Russia stockpiled many thousands of weapons, China maintained a so-called minimum deterrent of a few hundred warheads. It was never important for them to engage in the kind of arms race that you saw between the United States and the Soviet Union, says Lewis. When you look at their numbers juxtaposed against ours, it's a pretty significant difference, says Robert P. Ashley Jr., an adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security and former head of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency.